Let's go. The threats are. There are no threats in this position. Let us look at checks in puzzle position. Rook to e1, check. Queen to f1, check. Queen to c1, check. Answer to this puzzle is knight to e4. King to g1. Knight takes rook. One more. Threats in puzzle position are. Queen takes pawn, check. Rook takes pawn. Bishop takes pawn. Here are the checks. Queen takes pawn, check. Solution to the puzzle is rook to e8. Queen takes rook, check. Queen takes queen. Let us go to the next puzzle. The threats are queen takes knight. Queen takes knight. Queen takes pawn. Pawn takes knight. There are no checks in this position. The puzzle is solved using queen takes pawn. Rook to a4. Rook to a8. Rook to c4, check. Queen takes rook. Queen takes bishop, check. King takes queen. Let's continue. Here are threats in puzzle position. Bishop takes pawn. Pawn takes pawn. There are no checks in this position. Answer to this puzzle is h6. Queen takes pawn. Rook to h7. Queen takes rook. Knight takes queen. Another one. Threats in puzzle position are queen takes pawn. Knight takes pawn. Bishop takes pawn. Pawn takes pawn. Bishop takes pawn. Bishop takes pawn. Bishop takes knight. There are no checks in this position. The puzzle is solved using queen takes pawn. Queen takes queen. Bishop takes queen. Knight to b3. Bishop takes rook. Let's see the next puzzle. The threats are king takes pawn. There are no checks in this position. Here is the solution to the puzzle. King to f8. Rook takes rook, check. Bishop takes rook. Bishop takes pawn. Pawn takes bishop. Next puzzle. The threats are bishop takes pawn. Rook takes pawn. Let us look at checks in puzzle position. Queen to g6, check. Queen to h7, check. Solution to the puzzle is g3. Queen takes bishop. Rook takes queen. Rook takes rook. Queen to g6, check. King to h8. Queen takes pawn, check. Next, threats in this position are queen takes knight, check. Queen takes pawn, check. Queen takes pawn. Bishop takes pawn. Here are checks in puzzle position. Queen takes knight, check. Queen takes pawn, check. Queen to g6, check. The answer is bishop to c1. Bishop to b4, check. King to f1. Queen takes rook. Knight takes queen. Let's see the next puzzle. Threats in this position are. There are no threats in this position. There are no checks in this position. Here is the solution to the puzzle. King to b6. Rook to b5, check. Bishop takes rook. Let's see the next puzzle. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are. Queen takes knight. There are no checks in this position. The puzzle is solved using d5. Pawn takes pawn. Rook to a1. Queen takes rook. Rook takes queen. Let's see the next puzzle. Here are the threats. Bishop takes pawn. Queen takes knight. Here are the checks. Queen to e6, check. Queen to g4, check. The puzzle is solved using queen to g4, check. Knight to f5. Rook to h3. Rook to e8, check. King to d2. Queen takes rook. Queen takes queen. Let us go to the next puzzle. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are. There are no threats in this position. There are no checks in this position. The best move in puzzle position is king to f7. Rook takes bishop, check. King takes rook. Next, threats in this position are knight takes pawn. Pawn takes pawn. There are no checks in this position. Answer to this puzzle is bishop to e8. Queen takes pawn. Bishop to f7. Queen takes bishop. Rook takes queen. Next, threats in puzzle position are queen takes pawn. The checks are knight to d6, check. Knight to f6, check. Rook to d8, check. Answer to this puzzle is rook to f1. Queen takes rook, check. Queen takes queen. Let's see the next puzzle. Threats in puzzle position are Queen takes bishop. The checks are knight to f6, check. The puzzle is solved using knight to c3, queen to c2, bishop to e4, queen to b2, rook to b1, rook to c8, rook takes queen. Let us go to the next puzzle. Here are threats in puzzle position. Knight takes pawn. Knight takes pawn. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes rook. There are no checks in this position. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Rook to a1. Queen takes rook. Rook takes queen. Let's see the next puzzle. Let us look at threats in puzzle position. Queen takes bishop. Bishop takes pawn, check. Let us look at checks in puzzle position. Bishop takes pawn, check. The puzzle is solved using knight to a5, knight to d5, knight takes queen, knight takes queen, knight takes bishop. Another puzzle. Threats in this position are rook takes pawn, queen takes bishop, queen takes pawn, check. The checks are queen takes pawn, check. The puzzle is solved using rook to b5, queen takes rook, queen takes queen. Another one. Let us look at threats in puzzle position. Bishop takes pawn, check. Pawn takes pawn. Checks in this position are bishop takes pawn, check. Solution to the puzzle is e4. Bishop takes pawn. Pawn takes bishop. Another puzzle. The threats are queen takes pawn. Queen takes knight. Pawn takes pawn. Rook takes pawn, check. The checks are rook takes pawn, check. The best move in puzzle position is bishop to c1. Queen takes bishop. Rook takes queen. Let us go to the next puzzle. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are rook takes pawn. Bishop takes pawn. Checks in puzzle position are queen to d4, check. Bishop to d4, check. The answer is queen to d4, check. King to f1. Bishop to f5. Rook takes pawn. Bishop takes queen. Rook takes queen. Bishop takes rook. Another one. The threats are queen takes rook. Pawn takes pawn. Knight takes pawn. Knight takes pawn. There are no checks in this position. Solution to the puzzle is pawn takes pawn. Rook to f1. b3. Bishop takes pawn. Knight takes bishop. Let's see the next puzzle. Let us look at threats in puzzle position. Queen takes pawn. There are no checks in this position. Solution to the puzzle is h5. Knight to h6, check. King to g7. Knight takes pawn. King takes knight. Let's see the next puzzle. Here are threats in puzzle position. Pawn takes bishop. Queen takes pawn. Rook takes rook. There are no checks in this position. The answer is rook takes rook. Queen takes rook. Rook to e1. Queen takes rook, check. Queen takes queen. Let us go to the next puzzle. Here are threats in puzzle position. There are no threats in this position. There are no checks in this position. The puzzle is solved using king to c7, g3, bishop to g7, queen takes knight, check. King takes queen. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.